Have you noticed how the ground beneath us feels like it's, well, constantly shifting?
Oh,
It's the
actually.
pace of change and disruption, whether it's tech, markets, even how we work. It's just relentless.
Yeah, it really is.
And it means those traditional advantages, like just having massive scale or the big brand name,
Mm,
they simply aren't enough anymore. The real key, it feels like, to long-term success has fundamentally shifted.
it really has.
It seems less about having these perfectly crafted, rigid plans
Right.
and far more about something more, well, dynamic,
Yeah.
rapid learning and adaptation.
That's precisely it. I mean, the reality is no matter how carefully you put together that initial plan,
Hmm.
it's going to hit bumps, right? Unforeseen challenges. The real power, the true competitive edge lies in how quickly an organization can figure out what's happening,
Okay.
gather those deep insights, and then, crucially, adjust its course.
Adjust faster.
Exactly. Adjust faster. That's why we're doing this deep dive today into what some call the velocity doctrine, or, as we like to frame it, the build fast, adjust faster philosophy.
Right. And our mission here, for you listening, is really to give you a shortcut, a direct route, kind of, to understanding how organizations can not just, survive,
Uh-huh.
but actually thrive in this incredibly fluid environment.
Yeah.
We've distilled the most impactful insights from a pretty comprehensive report on this exact topic.
Yeah, we have.
And we really believe you'll walk away with some surprisingly actionable takeaways.
We've got quite a journey mapped out. We'll start by uncovering some of the secrets behind Google's innovation engine,
Okay.
then connect those sort of organic insights to more formal, powerful frameworks like agile and lean startup.
It makes sense.
We'll dig into the absolutely critical role of culture.
Always key.
Always illustrate all of this with, powerful real-world examples, successes and failures.
Good to see both sides.
Definitely. And finally, we'll aim to give you a clear blueprint for how you might implement these very ideas in your own context.
Excellent. So let's unpack this. Our journey, as you said, begins with an icon, Larry Page, co-founder of Google.
Right.
He really seems to embody this build fast, adjust faster idea.
He absolutely does.
From Google's earliest days, his vision wasn't just about building cool products, was it? It was more about creating an organizational engine, like a perpetual motion machine for rapid, intelligent pivots.
Precisely. And central to that machine, a relentless user focus and, of course, data-driven decisions.
So how did that philosophy translate?
Well, what's truly fascinating is how Page's philosophy wasn't just like a high-level idea. It was embedded right into Google's DNA. It shaped everything.
Okay.
His leadership was built on some core, almost counterintuitive beliefs. First, that unwavering user focus. Page was absolutely convinced that building products that deeply resonated with users, that was the only path to sustainable success.
Not just short-term gains.
Exactly, which meant prioritizing continuous feedback, and that naturally connects building fast to adjusting faster.
Right.
Think about Google's early disciplined resistance to cluttering its search page with banner ads.
Yeah, I remember that. It felt so clean compared to everything else.
It did. Even when ads were the norm, they prioritized simplicity and user experience above, quick revenue grabs. In hindsight, that was a radical and brilliant choice.
And then there was his push for, what was it, moonshot thinking.
Yeah, audacious moonshot thinking, aiming for 10x improvements, not just, 10% better.
10 times better.
10 times. He wasn't interested in small incremental gains. This fostered a culture of radical experimentation. You see it in things like Waymo.
The self-driving cars.
Right, or their big pushes into renewable energy. These weren't small bets. They were designed to be giant leaps.
But leaps based on something solid, presumably.
Absolutely. And to ensure those leaps were grounded, the culture was data-driven to its absolute core. Page, with his background in computer science and data analysis, he instilled this rigorous, evidence-based approach to making decisions. At Google, hypotheses weren't just, theories tossed around.
They had to be tested.
They had to be validated through extensive experimentation, through user feedback. This approach refined everything from their revolutionary PageRank algorithm to every single new product feature they launched.
So beyond the philosophy, How did Google actually structure things to make this speed and agility happen? What were the practical mechanisms?
Well, one of the most famous examples, and maybe one of the most misunderstood, is Google's 20% time policy.
Yes, the legendary 20% time,
Right. Employees were encouraged, sometimes strongly encouraged, to dedicate 20% of their work week to projects they believed would most benefit Google.
which sounds great, but how did it really work to de-risk innovation?
Well, think about it. Most companies, let's be honest, punish failure.
True.
Google strategically institutionalized innovation and risk-taking. 20% time wasn't just a perk. It was a really clever way to decentralize and de-risk innovation at scale.
How so?
It allowed engineers, product managers, anyone really, to pursue radical ideas knowing that if they failed, they weren't necessarily jeopardizing their primary role or career path. It reframed potential punishment into valuable learning.
Ah, okay. Like a safety net for experimenting.
Exactly. It acted as this crucial cultural release valve, normalizing experimentation and learning from mistakes.
Yeah.
Even if, as some employees joked, it sometimes felt more like 120% time trying to juggle it all.
I bet. And this empowerment wasn't just about time, right? It was also about talent and collaboration.
Absolutely. A deep emphasis on attracting top talent, obviously, but also fostering relentless collaboration. Google famously designed its offices with open spaces.
The cafes, the whiteboards everywhere.
Right. Intentionally designed to break down silos and spark spontaneous creativity. The goal was to make sure ideas could be shared quickly, debated, and then executed by cross-functional teams. Get those innovations out faster.
Okay, so you have the culture, the structure. What about managing the actual projects day to day for that kind of velocity?
Right. Operationally, Google powers its velocity by seamlessly combining the flexibility of agile methodologies with the strategic discipline of OKRs, objectives and key results.
OKRs. Okay, let's break that down. First, agile. Google widely uses agile, right? Prioritizing iterative progress, constant feedback.
Yes, very much so.
You hear about teams working in these short, focused sprints, typically 2 to 4 weeks long, using frameworks like Scrum, daily stand-ups, reviews. It feels like this approach inherently minimizes risk by getting something out quickly and learning fast.
It absolutely does. It accelerates their time to market dramatically. That's all built around these rapid cycles of build, test, learn. Build something small, get it out, see what happens, adjust.
And then the OKR system, how does that fit in? I know John Doerr introduced it there.
Right. OKRs ensure that all this speed, all this rapid iteration doesn't just evolve into chaos or, random activity.
Keeps it pointed in the right direction.
Precisely. Objectives are those big, ambitious, sometimes aspirational goals, like revolutionize the mobile user experience.
Okay, big picture.
Exactly. And key results are the specific, measurable outcomes that tell you if you're getting closer to that objective. Things like increase user satisfaction score by 15% or reduce app load time by 30%.
Concrete targets.
Concrete measurable targets. This system ensures that every rapid iteration, every single sprint, is tightly aligned with those broader, often audacious company goals. It connects the day-to-day work directly to the moonshot vision.
So it's fascinating. Google built this incredibly agile culture, almost, it sounds like intuitively, driven by Page's vision.
In many ways, yes.
But what's really interesting is how many of those organic practices at Google are actually codified, formalized in methodologies that any organization can potentially leverage.
That's a key point.
It provides kind of blueprint for adaptability, even if you're not a tech giant based in Mountain View.
Absolutely. And that brings us neatly to those formal frameworks.
Right. Where do we start?
Well, the quintessential formal framework for adaptability has to be the Agile Manifesto. It was forged back in 2001 by 17 software developers. Kind of a, rebel alliance moment.
Fed up with the old ways.
Exactly. Fed up with traditional, rigid, heavyweight development processes. Its 4 core values include prioritizing individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and working software over comprehensive documentation. Important stuff. But most critically for our discussion today, it explicitly values responding to change over following a plan.
And that phrase, responding to change.
Yeah.
That really is the absolute essence of adjusting faster, isn't it?
It is. It fundamentally reframes change. It's not something to be feared or avoided or managed away.
Right.
It's an opportunity to be harnessed for competitive advantage. It's about embracing new information, market shifts, customer feedback, using it as fuel for innovation, not seeing it as a roadblock.
To really get why Agile was so revolutionary, maybe we should contrast it with what came before, the waterfall model.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding the antithesis really highlights Agile's power. We all kind of know waterfall, right? That very linear, sequential approach.
Yeah, gather requirements, then design, then build, then test. Each phase locked down before the next begins.
Exactly. And what's its fundamental Achilles heel, especially when, as you said, the ground is constantly shifting?
Well, it assumes you can know everything up front perfectly.
Bingo. Its fatal flaw lies in that unspoken assumption that requirements will be perfectly defined and, crucially, static from day one.
Which, let's face it, almost never happens in reality.
Almost never. So in waterfall, any deviation, any change request midstream becomes incredibly disruptive and prohibitively expensive. It's like trying to reroute a river after it's already carved its path.
And we've seen the real-world consequences of that rigidity, haven't we? Companies like Kodak
Oh, absolutely. Kodak clinging desperately to its film business.
and Blockbuster sticking to the video rental store model while streaming emerged.
Textbook examples. Their downfall wasn't just bad luck. It was, at its very heart, a profound failure to respond to change, a failure to adjust.
So, Agile, in contrast,
Yeah.
how does it operationalize that adaptability?
It does it through practical methodologies like Scrum and Kanban.
Hmm.
They institutionalize adaptability using short, time-boxed iterations.
Sprints.
Sprints, exactly, typically lasting 1 to 4 weeks. The magic here is that at the end of each sprint, a working increment of the product is delivered.
Something tangible.
Something tangible. And crucial feedback is gathered. This provides regular built-in opportunities to change direction. You're constantly course-correcting based on real data and real feedback.
And it's so vital to remember, isn't it, that Agile isn't just about adopting the tools or the ceremonies like daily stand-ups or retrospectives.
Oh, absolutely not. That's a common mistake.
It's really a cultural blueprint.
Huh.
You mentioned Google's success with Agile stemmed from its pre-existing culture already embodying those values.
Yes. That's why so many organizations struggle when they try to implement Agile by just, forcing the processes onto a culture that isn't ready for it.
Right. You need the mindset shift, too.
You absolutely need the mindset shift towards continuous learning, collaboration, and adaptation. Without that cultural foundation, the processes often just crumble or become theater.
Okay, so if Agile is about organizing the how of building adaptively, what about the what? That brings us to lean startup, right?
Exactly. The lean startup methodology, which Eric Ries popularized, essentially applies the scientific method directly to business and product development.
The scientific method. How so?
Its core is the build, measure, learn feedback loop. It's a continuous cycle. First, you build a minimum viable product, an MVP,
Okay.
specifically designed to test a core hypothesis you have about your product or market.
Not the whole product, just enough to test something specific.
Precisely. Then you measure. You release that MVP to actual users and rigorously collect data, both quantitative, like usage metrics, and qualitative, like interviews.
Get the real feedback.
Get the real feedback. Finally, you learn from that data. You gain what Ries calls validated learning, and based on that learning, you make a crucial decision. Do you persevere on your current path, maybe tweaking things, or do you pivot your strategy significantly?
This whole loop, it's designed to avoid wasted effort, right?
Absolutely. It's all about minimizing waste. Instead of spending months or even years building something in isolation based on assumptions that might be totally wrong,
Yeah.
the build, measure, learn loop ensures your development effort is always guided by what customers actually demonstrate they want and value. It focuses your resources where they truly matter, on learning what works.
Let's talk more about that MVP, the minimum viable product. It feels like that term gets thrown around a lot and may be misunderstood.
It definitely does. It's often misinterpreted as just like a crappy version 1.0 or the quickest thing you can hack together.
Right.
But that's not the point. An MVP, formally, is that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort.
Maximum validated learning, least effort.
All right. Its primary purpose isn't to be a product launch. It's risk reduction. It's about testing your most critical assumption, usually the does anyone actually need or want this, hypothesis as quickly and cheaply as possible before you invest heavily.
So it's a learning tool first and foremost.
Exactly. The biggest challenge often isn't the technology, it's overcoming the psychological barrier, the fear of releasing something imperfect out into the world to learn from it.
Can you give some examples of what MVPs look like in practice? They're not always code, are they?
Not at all. MVPs can take many forms. Dropbox famously used a simple explainer video,
Just a video?
just a video demonstrating the concept. They put it online with a sign-up form to gauge interest before writing a single line of production code. The sign-ups went through the roof, validating their core value proposition.
Clever. What else?
We've seen effective landing page MVPs, just a web page describing the product to collect signups or pre-orders. There are Wizard of Oz MVPs.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, where the front end looks automated to the user, but the back end is actually being done manually by the team.
Ah, pulling the levers behind the curtain.
Exactly. To test the process and demand before building complex automation. And even incredibly low-fidelity prototypes, paper sketches, clickable mock-ups. Remember Aardvark, the old social search engine?
Vaguely, yeah.
They apparently built and tested 6 distinct MVPs, 6 different approaches, before finding the model that really clicked with users. It's all about iterating to learn, not launching something perfect day one.
That iterative spirit, learning through building, sounds a lot like design thinking principles too, especially around prototyping.
Very much so. IDEO, the design firm, deeply embraces prototyping as a way to learn fast. Their philosophy is quite blunt. If you want to succeed sooner, you're going to have to fail earlier and fail a lot.
Fail earlier, fail a lot.
Prototyping is their mechanism for enabling that controlled, accelerated learning. It makes failure productive, not something to be hidden.
And they have guidance on how to prototype effectively.
They do. A key idea is that prototype fidelity should match your idea certainty.
Meaning?
So, for early exploration, when you're still just trying to understand the problem or explore possibilities, use low-fidelity prototypes, cheap, fast things like simple paper sketches or rough physical models. Don't overinvest.
Makes sense.
Key principles include start rough and rapid, build just enough to learn what you need to learn next, embrace pivots by maybe using modular elements you can swap out, and crucially, don't reinvent the wheel. Use existing tools and components whenever possible.
So it's a structured way to apply that build fast, adjust faster mindset directly to the innovation and problem-solving process itself.
Exactly. It brings their iterative learning right into the earliest stages of concept development.
Okay, so we've talked about agile, lean startup, MVPs, design thinking. The benefits of these rapid iteration cycles seem pretty clear. Faster time to market.
Definitely. Reduced risk of building the wrong thing.
Increased flexibility, better user satisfaction.
And often lower overall development costs in the long run because you avoid big, wasteful efforts.
But it can't be all sunshine and roses, right? It's not some kind of silver bullet.
No, absolutely not. There's no magic agile dust you can just sprinkle on a company.
If only.
Wouldn't that be nice? Rapid iteration requires constant vigilance. It's like tending a fast-growing plant. You have to manage it carefully. The dynamism is powerful, but it can be a double-edged sword if you're not prepared.
What are some of the potential downsides or prerequisites?
Well, scope creep can be a real danger if you're not disciplined about managing the backlog and sticking to the sprint goals.
Right. Constantly adding new things without focus.
Exactly. It also puts a high dependence on having skilled, motivated, and truly collaborative teams. It doesn't work well with siloed groups or low-trust environments.
Okay.
You absolutely need constant, robust involvement from users and stakeholders to provide that feedback. It's not a set-it-and-forget-it approach.
Requires commitment.
A huge commitment. There's also potential for poor documentation if teams aren't diligent, which can hurt long-term maintenance. And frankly, it has limited suitability for extremely large-scale, tightly regulated systems where absolute predictability and comprehensive upfront design are legally or structurally mandated.
So it's powerful but needs the right conditions.
Precisely. Which brings us back to something we touched on earlier.
Culture.
Exactly. It becomes crystal clear that even the best processes, agile, lean, design thinking, they're pretty much inert, just going through the motions without the right cultural fuel and maybe lubricant.
The cultural lubricant. I like that.
Yeah.
And this brings us to that absolutely crucial cultural bedrock, psychological safety and the freedom to fail.
And the insight here isn't just anecdotal. It's strongly supported by Google's own internal research. Remember Project Aristotle?
Right. You mentioned that earlier. Their study on team effectiveness.
Yeah, launched back in 2012. They embarked on this really ambitious quest, analyzing over 180 diverse teams across Google. They looked at everything: personality types, skills, team structure, manager behaviors, trying to pinpoint what exactly made some teams excel while others struggled.
And the big reveal.
The surprising Number one finding, the single most important factor, wasn't who was on the team. It wasn't about having all the rock stars together.
No, what was it then?
It was how the team members interacted. The key determinant of high performance was psychological safety.
Psychological safety. Define that for us again.
Sure, it's a shared belief within the team that the environment is safe for interpersonal risk-taking.
Okay. Risk-taking like what?
Like speaking up with a crazy idea, asking a question that might seem basic, admitting a mistake, or respectfully disagreeing with the boss or the consensus, all without fear of being punished, shamed, or embarrassed.
Okay, so feeling safe to be vulnerable and honest.
Exactly. Think about it this way. In a team with high psychological safety, if you spot a potential flaw in a plan, you raise it immediately. You know it'll be seen as helpful, as trying to make the project better, not as being negative or challenging authority.
Whereas in a low-safety team,
You might stay silent. You might worry about looking stupid or rocking the boat or getting blamed if you're wrong. So you let that small issue slide.
and it potentially snowballs into a crisis later.
Precisely. And crucially, link this back to our main theme. Without psychological safety, that whole build, measure, learn loop we talked about just breaks down.
How so?
Because teams will inevitably hide failures. They'll resist pivoting away from a failing plan because admitting the original plan was flawed feels too risky personally. They won't share the bad news from the measure step, so the learn step gets corrupted or skipped entirely.
Wow. Okay, so it's foundational, and leaders play a big role in creating this safety, right? It doesn't just happen.
Leaders have an absolutely outsized impact. It's not something that just bubbles up organically from the bottom. The standard is largely set from the very top.
So what should leaders do?
Several key behaviors. First, they must model vulnerability themselves.
Be vulnerable. How?
By openly admitting their own mistakes, talking about times they were wrong, or sharing what they don't know. This makes it okay for others to do the same. It powerfully normalizes failure and uncertainty for the entire team.
Okay, lead by example. What else?
They should framework, especially challenging projects, as a learning problem, not just an execution task.
Frame it as learning.
Yeah, position it as, we're exploring here, the outcome is uncertain, we need to run experiments to figure it out, rather than, here's the plan, just go execute it perfectly. This explicitly invites experimentation and acknowledges risk.
Makes sense.
Also, leaders must actively encourage dissent and productive conflict.
Encourage conflict. That sounds risky.
Productive conflict, meaning foster respectful debate where ideas are challenged, not people. Create norms where it's expected and valued to disagree constructively, so the best idea wins, not just the idea from the highest paid person or the loudest voice.
Focus on the idea, not the person. Got it.
And finally, and this is huge, they need to reward risk-taking, not just success.
Reward failure.
Reward the attempt. Celebrate bold experiments. Celebrate the valuable lessons learned, even when the experiment itself doesn't achieve its intended outcome. This reinforces that learning is the primary goal, not just hitting predetermined targets.
So there's a direct link then. Leader vulnerability encourages team experimentation,
Which accelerates learning.
which drives innovation.
Exactly. It creates this positive feedback loop throughout the organization.
And when you have this kind of leadership, modeling vulnerability, encouraging learning, focusing on ideas, it cultivates something bigger, right? A whole culture.
It absolutely does. It cultivates a truly resilient, learning-oriented culture, one that's characterized by genuine curiosity, a deep-seated growth mindset, the belief that abilities can be developed, and a commitment to continuous improvement.
And breaking down silos.
Yes, actively breaking down silos to enable that seamless cross-functional collaboration we talked about earlier.
And in that kind of culture.
Employees feel empowered. They're given genuine autonomy and trusted to figure things out. Change isn't viewed as this scary threat to be resisted. It's seen as a constant opportunity, an opportunity to learn, to evolve, to get better. This is where an organization truly becomes agile, designed from its very foundation to adapt and thrive no matter how unpredictable the world gets.
Okay, this is powerful stuff. Let's move from the theory and the internal dynamics now to some really compelling real-world consequences.
Right, where the rubber meets the road.
Illustrating the, frankly, life-or-death importance of adapting faster. This brings us to that dichotomy of adaptation, the really stark contrast between market leaders who thrived by adjusting and the laggards who, well, crumbled.
Netflix is just a masterclass in strategic pivoting.
Right, where did they start? DVDs by mail, was it?
Exactly. Started as a direct challenger to Blockbuster, mailing red envelopes. But they didn't rest on their laurels. They proactively recognized both the existential threat and the massive opportunity of digital distribution, of streaming.
And that led to their first huge pivot.
Their first major pivot, streaming video. And what's truly incredible looking back is that they were willing to actively cannibalize their already profitable, growing DVD by mail business to fully embrace streaming.
That takes guts.
Yeah.
Risking the current cash cow for an uncertain future.
Huge guts. Then, as streaming matured and became crowded, they didn't stop adapting. They made their second massive pivot.
Becoming a content creator.
Becoming a world-class content creator, a global studio, really, with original programming like House of Cards kicking it off. They shifted from just distributing other people's content to making their own must-watch shows and movies.
And how did they know what to make? How did they guide those huge content bets?
Well, that's where their data-driven nature, their constant learning comes in. Those massive strategic shifts were powered by incredibly granular user-viewing data.
What people watched, when they stopped watching, what genres they liked.
All of it. That constant micro-level testing and learning gave them the insights and, importantly, the confidence and agility to make those huge macro-level pivots into streaming and then original content. Netflix's enduring success is a direct result of its organizational capacity to adjust faster, driven by insights, fueled by data, and showing a remarkable willingness to reinvent itself.
Okay, that's the success story. Now the flip side, the cautionary tale. Kodak.
Kodak. Such a tragic story, especially when you know the details.
What's the stunning irony there?
The stunning, almost unbelievable irony is that a Kodak engineer, a guy named Steve Sasson, actually invented the world's first digital camera.
Kodak invented the digital camera?
When? Way back in 1975.
Wow. So why didn't they dominate the digital era?
Because instead of championing this groundbreaking invention, Kodak's leadership actively suppressed the technology.
Suppressed it. Why?
Fear. They were terrified it would damage their incredibly lucrative, high-margin film business. They couldn't see past protecting their existing golden goose.
So it was cultural paralysis, really.
Absolutely. Cultural paralysis in action. The entire organization, its structure, its incentives, its identity was built around chemical film processing. There was deep internal resistance to change, widespread complacency born from decades of market dominance, and ultimately a profound failure to heed clear market feedback and the potential of their own invention.
It's like a textbook case of that innovator's dilemma concept, isn't it?
Absolutely textbook. Successful companies failing precisely because they're unwilling or unable to disrupt their existing profitable businesses to embrace the new, even when the new offers far greater long-term potential.
And that safe decision to protect the core film business?
Was ultimately the riskiest choice they could have possibly made.
Yeah.
It led directly to their bankruptcy in 2012. It's just such a powerful, painful lesson in how protecting the past can literally cost you the entire future.
And we see this pattern elsewhere too, right? Other examples.
Oh, definitely. On the success side, think of Airbnb. They started famously by renting out air mattresses on their living room floor during a conference.
Right, airbed and breakfast.
Exactly. They iterated constantly from that humble beginning, always listening to user feedback, tweaking the model, expanding, becoming the global platform they are today. Pure adaptation.
And Dropbox.
Dropbox, as we mentioned, used that simple explainer video MVP to validate massive demand before building the full product, de-risking the whole venture up front.
And on the failure side, beyond Kodak.
Well, there's Blockbuster again, which reportedly had the chance to acquire a fledgling Netflix for around $50 million back in 2000, and declined, clinging stubbornly to its physical stores. And Nokia, remember Nokia?
Dominated the mobile phone world for years.
Totally dominant. But they utterly failed to adapt to the smartphone revolution, particularly the crucial shift towards software ecosystems like iOS and Android. They missed the boat completely.
So this really drives home the point. Adapting faster isn't just nice to have, it's fundamental to survival and success.
It really is.
So, okay, let's bring this home. What does this all mean for you, the listener? How can leaders or even individuals actually embed this build fast, adjust faster philosophy into their own organizations or work?
Right, the practical application. We've got what we think is a pretty clear blueprint for implementation, a framework for building organizational agility.
Where does it start?
It has to start with strategic leadership. That sets the tone and direction for everything else.
Okay, what does strategic leadership look like in this context?
First, maybe redefine your mission. Think about shifting from a narrow product-specific mission like Kodak's "We Sell Film" to a broader problem-solving mission, like we help people capture and share memories.
Ah, so the mission itself becomes more adaptable.
Exactly. It builds adaptability right into your core purpose. Second, leaders need to consciously lead with questions, not always with answers.
Embrace not knowing everything.
Precisely. Adopt what some call a learning leadership mode. Acknowledge you don't have all the answers. Foster genuine inquiry. Make it safe for the team to explore and discover.
And critically.
Critically, you need to resource for learning, not just for execution. Allocate and protect budget and time specifically for experimentation, for prototyping, for building robust customer feedback loops. Shield these learning activities from the constant pressure of short-term results.
Okay, strategic leadership sets the stage. What about the engine itself, the operational processes?
Right, installing the engine of iteration. First, if you haven't already, seriously consider adopting a formal agile framework like Scrum or Kanban.
More than just the buzzwords.
Way more. It's not just about the ceremonies, though they help. It establishes that essential, consistent rhythm of short development cycles, frequent delivery of actual value, and continuous feedback. It gives you those repeated, structured opportunities to inspect your work and adapt your plan.
And feedback loops.
You have to establish a really robust feedback loop system. Think multi-channel. Systems for systematically collecting, analyzing, and crucially, acting on customer feedback. Mix the quantitative analytics, engagement metrics, A/B test results with the qualitative user interviews, surveys, insights from your sales and customer support teams on the front lines.
Get the full picture.
Get the full picture constantly. And related to this, mandate MVP thinking. Ingrain it in the culture. For any significant new initiative, the default first question should instinctively be, what is the smallest, fastest thing we can possibly build or do to test our most critical underlying assumption?
Make build, measure, learn the default pathway.
Make it the absolute default for exploring any new idea or direction.
Okay, strategy operations. That leaves the foundation. Culture.
The cultural development, cultivating the very soil where agility can grow. And job number one,
Psychological safety.
make psychological safety priority one. And this requires deliberate, intentional effort. It won't just happen. We're talking workshops, leaders consistently and visibly modeling vulnerability, establishing clear team norms for handling mistakes constructively, managing conflict respectfully. You have to actively build an environment where it feels truly safe to speak up and take risks.
And how do you handle the inevitable failures that come with experimentation?
You actively celebrate and publicize intelligent failures.
Celebrate failures. How does that work?
You destigmatize failure. Use formal forums like blameless postmortem meetings where the explicit focus is on extracting the learnings, not assigning blame. Reward the learning that came from the experiment. Reward the courage it took to try something bold, not just the successful outcome. This sends an incredibly powerful signal throughout the entire organization about what's truly valued.
And finally, people.
And finally, people, you need to hire for and actively promote a growth mindset. Embed agility into your talent management processes. Screen candidates not just for current skills, but for curiosity, for resilience, for their openness to learning and feedback.
And promote the right leaders.
And just as importantly, promote leaders who demonstrably foster these qualities: psychological safety, learning, collaboration within their own teams. Reinforce the culture through who you elevate.
Wow. Okay, so putting it all together.
Yep.
What's crystal clear is that this build fast, adjust faster doctrine isn't just, a simple mantra or a checklist of tools.
Not at all.
It's really a comprehensive organizational system. It tightly integrates strategic leadership, those operational processes for iteration, and maybe most importantly, a deeply ingrained culture of continuous learning and psychological safety.
That's it, exactly. And while building fast is undeniably a powerful capability in today's world, it is the organizational capacity to adjust faster, to learn and adapt rapidly based on feedback and changing conditions that creates the truly enduring competitive advantage.
That's the real differentiator.
That's the ultimate differentiator in an unpredictable world. This capacity for rapid, intelligent adaptation fueled by constant user feedback, powered by agile processes, and protected by that culture of psychological safety, that's what ultimately determines success or failure in the modern economy. It's really the difference between leading the future and, sadly, becoming, like Kodak or Blockbuster, a relic of the past.
A powerful thought to end on. So, for everyone listening, maybe the final question to ponder is this. What core assumptions is your organization, or maybe even your own work, built upon right now that might need to be challenged and retested in this rapidly changing world? How might applying just one of these principles, maybe it's trying an MVP, maybe it's focusing on psychological safety in your next team meeting, how might that change your approach to a project you're working on right now? Something to think about.